The scariest movies, the ones that keep you awake at night, are often defined not by their heroes, but by their villains. And nowhere is that more pronounced than in slasher movies. Michael Myers, Jason, Ghostface, we remember their masks, their weapons, their insatiable thirst for vengeance. And nowhere is the opposite more true than in superhero movies. For every Thanos and Joker, there's 100 other also ran villains that just fade into obscurity. And instead, it's the heroes we remember, their mask, their weapons, their thirst for vengeance. But what if there was a character that was both? That was, on the one hand, a slasher, brutal and powerful, lurks in the shadows, unyielding in his pursuit of his victims. No matter how fast they run, how hard they fight back, no matter how much they beg for mercy. But what makes this slasher different, what makes them a hero, is that they only target one kind of victim: other slashers. To put it another way, or like you might see on a poster, it takes a man in a mask to kill a man in a mask. Our story begins with a little mini horror movie of its own. We hard in on a pair of dirty black boots sneaking across a dead lawn just outside of an old two-story house in the town of Homeland, Kansas, population 30,000. A nice town, but this is definitely the wrong side of the tracks. The boots sneak past, pick up on cinder blocks, lightning bugs buzzing about, and up a gutter in the back. We're in a killer's POV. They whip out a switchblade and pry open an attic window. Inside, a boy, scrawny, about 12, headphones on, playing Mario Kart because it's actually 2004, has no idea that the killer is getting closer and closer and closer when suddenly the killer lunges, blasting the boy with shaving cream. Turns out it's not a killer at all. It's a 15-year-old girl named Roxy, and the boy is her brother Casey, and this is actually a foster home. Casey and Roxy are the only biological siblings amongst a cluster of about six, including Oscar, who's 8, and Clementine, the baby, is barely 2. Door swings open, revealing Miss Barbara and her boyfriend Earl, who are drunks that take in the kids for the extra money they get from the state. They're yelling at them to keep it down. Roxy has to quickly duck and hide because she's not even supposed to be there right now. She's supposed to be in juvie, but she broke out. She is a little bit of a badass. And when Miss Barbara walks off, Roxy pops back up and tells her brother, pack a bag. We're getting the hell out of here. With that, boom, we cut to them joyriding in a 64 black GTO that Roxy stole. And when you're 15, a car isn't just a car, it is a ticket to a whole new life. She and Casey tear down the highway, sipping on Jim Beam and Pop Rocks, dreaming about the future, about all the possibilities of just being free. When suddenly they spot a party out at the lake house at Kegger. Why the hell not, they figure. So they slip inside, and almost instantly and possibly they're having the time of their lives, dancing, laughing, flirting. Casey heads off back to the car with an older girl, older being about 14, about to get his first kiss. When suddenly they smell something from the trunk. Casey pops it open, and underneath the flap, sure enough, 2 bodies. Women, bound, gagged, dead. And that's when Casey starts to see the car in a different light. Different light. The skull gear shifter, the VIN number scratched off. Inside the glove box, he pulls out a knife covered in dry blood, which is when he notices beneath the steering wheel is a small, blinking red light, a tracker. That's when, in the rearview mirror, Casey notices a man stepping out of the shadows wearing a mask. With that, they run back to the party. Casey tears up the stairs. He finds Roxy making out with some guy, tries to tell her what's going on when screams start to ring out from below. A massacre has begun. Casey and Roxy try to sneak out of a bedroom window, but they can hear the killer coming up the stairs, down the hall. Casey ducks into a closet. Roxy hides under a bed as the door opens. The kids can see each other, scared, shaking. The killer moves to the window. This is Casey's chance. Run out, push the guy over the edge, out the window. But he's too afraid. He can't do it. And suddenly Roxy leaps up and she shoves the man out the second story window, sending him crashing down to the ground. Casey gets out and throws his arms around Roxy, only to realize there's a knife sticking out of her gut. She falls to the ground, blood spilling out of her mouth. Her last words, "I love you." With that, she's gone. And Casey just stares at her. With this look in his eyes, he blames himself. Should have been him. The sirens in the distance mix with the crickets in the wind. Casey looks out the window only to find, as if his heart isn't broken enough, the killer is gone. And with that, we cut. And now it's 20 years later, and we can see Casey's blue eyes staring back at us, not from within the face of a boy, but from within the face of a man, cold and fierce, standing in the dark woods, staring out at what could easily be a Norman Rockwell painting of children, campers gathered around a fire, laughing, roasting marshmallows. Two counselors, a guy and a girl, start to whisper and sneak off to the woods, a nod to the opening of the original Friday the 13th. And when Casey starts to follow them and then pulls a matte metal mask over his face with details of a skull etched in, a nod to his sister's killer, a wound that has never healed, it may start to dawn on us that this man might have actually grown up to become a slasher himself. The guy and the girl start to make out in the forest, and just as Casey's grip tightens around a fierce Japanese garden sickle, his weapon of choice, suddenly, whoosh, another killer in an old plague mask, swinging an axe, comes barreling out of the trees. Casey springs into action, and now we realize he has become a slasher of slashers. And with that, we go into this incredible mano a mano set piece, celebrating what audiences know about slashers and even what they don't realize they know about slashers. And in the end of this, Casey turns to those teens from the beginning and he says to them the same thing he says to every victim he rescues. If you ever breathe a word of this to anybody, I'll come back for you too. And with that, we cut. And now the first half of Act 1 introduced us to our man in the mask. The back half of Act 1 is where we really meet the man behind the mask, where we really start bringing the audience into Casey's secret world. By day, when Casey's not killing demented murderers, he runs a landscaping business with his foster brother, Oscar. It's actually a smart cover because nobody asks why they have a lot of machetes and chainsaws in their pickup truck and a wood chipper in their garage. They've got a small crew that doesn't know their secret and running out of their home in Branson, Missouri, which is really just a few shacks on some dusty land. Oscar is sort of Casey's blue-collar Alfred, and their bat cave, as it were, is hidden beneath one of those shacks, which, after the years they've put in, is almost like a slasher museum filled with recovered weapons and whatnot. The mask of every slasher they kill gets hung up on the wall like a hunter hanging their trophies. And of course, like the Warrens' basement, everything in here is a potential movie unto itself. Spin-offs, prequels, it's where we'll layer in our Annabelle, our Nun, things that the audience get a peek at, that when they get a peek at, they'll be dying to see more. Now, Casey's mask and sickle are kept locked away in a separate floor safe because, of course, despite his good intentions, he is technically a mass murderer, and those two things could tie him to a lot of criminal savagery, a constant worry. The other thing there in that safe is actually Casey's most prized personal possession, the bottle of Jim Beam he and Roxy were drinking that night. Still a couple of shots left. Now, Oscar, like Alfred, is very much the detective in their partnership, tied into an online community of sleuths, reminiscent of the Netflix doc Don't Fuck with Cats, called the 3000, who specialize in hunting killers they deem to be slashers. The name the 3000 is a crime statistic reference. 66,000 people, and this is true, go missing every year. 63,000 people are usually found. The other 3,000 are just considered breakage. That breakage are the victims the 3000 hones in on, who they try to find justice for, the ones whose killers get away and keep killing for years, decades even, killers who live for the hunt, who kill fast with force and brutality, and most importantly, who wear masks. All slashers are technically serial killers, but not all serial killers are slashers. And of course, the slasher the 3000 is most fascinated by, most trying to identify, is Casey himself, the one they've nicknamed just the Hunter. Now, when Casey and Oscar get back home from this opening kill, their job is actually just getting started. See, slashers are really about making a statement as much as they are about murder, and Casey wants to make sure that statement never reaches anybody's ears, deprive them of the infamy that they seek. And what we'll see over Act One is that they go to extreme lengths to wipe out any trace of the slasher's murderous conquest so that it can't be used to inspire others, burning their records, clothes, fortresses of solitude even. But the first step is always getting rid of the body, hence the wood chipper. And so Casey and Oscar strip that slasher's corpse and load it in like this is all old hat, literally just chatting about the weather, when suddenly Slasher springs to life and grabs Casey around the throat, tackles him down. Casey crashes to the ground trying to rip this guy's arm off, and suddenly he realizes it was just in his head. A little embarrassed, Casey looks to Oscar, says, "Long day." But Oscar knows it's more than that. And it has been for a while now. This life has been taking a toll on Casey, haunted by the ghosts of the monsters that he has killed as much as he is from the past that he ran from that started the night Roxy died. He barely sleeps at night. Every creak in the floor or gust of wind jolts him awake, staring out at the darkness, wondering somebody's out there watching. When he closes his eyes, it sends him back to his brutal past, to the closet that Barbara forced him to live in after Roxy got killed and she almost lost her cash cow of foster kids, to a church reform school he got sent to after he tried to run away, to juvie where he got sent for beating up a crooked priest that was abusing one of the other kids. It's this past that makes Casey a beast on the battlefield, but a hermit in real life. No real friends, certainly not a girlfriend. Even Oscar, he keeps at arm's length. Casey would tell you it's because when you're hunting slashers, the last thing you want to give them is targets to go after to hurt you. But you know, that's not the whole truth. Oscar feels for Casey. Part of him wishes that he would just quit. But Oscar knows he'll never stop until they find Roxy's killer. But that's not what has Oscar worried right now. What he's really worried about is that this slasher, the one that they just caught in the opening, is missing a finger, cut off in the fight. And that is a very, very big problem. And it's how we meet Special Agent Dana Ellis, FBI Missing Persons Unit, the cat to Casey's mouse. Now, Ellis is a fucking bloodhound, like a female Tommy Lee Jones from The Fugitive with a little bit of Rusty Colt mixed in. And this finger is actually the big break that she was waiting for. She's been tracking Casey for a long time. And now finally she's got a trail to follow. Of course, the irony is, because Casey erases any trace of his victim's villainy, Ellis has no clue that the people she's trying to find are murderous slashers. She just thinks there's a regular old serial killer on the loose that likes to hunt single men ages 18 to 65 and is exceptionally good at disposing of their bodies. And so it's right around the end of Act One where our cat and mouse seemingly collide when in the middle of the night, Casey's eyes shoot open because he hears faintest noise. He grabs a knife and slowly moves around the house, the property. We assume it's Ellis about to swoop in when suddenly he finds Oscar on the ground, unconscious. That doesn't make any sense. When suddenly a guy in coveralls with this horrifyingly burnt, ghostly face that's actually a mask itself darts out of the shadows and attacks. In a flash, they're going at it, battling through the greenhouses on Casey's property where pane after pane of glass keeps shattering as they fight it out. Casey has no clue who this slasher is, but there's no time for that now. And just as you think this killer is about to stab Casey in the heart, instead, The slasher plunges a needle into Casey's neck and he falls to the floor, and we go to black. 3 hours later, when Casey and Oscar come to, they realize immediately whoever attacked them obviously wasn't trying to kill them. There's something else going on here, because this slasher, whoever he is, broke into the cave. Now, everything is exactly as they left it. All the remnants and relics of the slashers they've disposed of over the years are still there, except for one thing. The safe has been dug out. Casey's mask, sickle, even that bottle of Jim Beam are gone. But Casey and Oscar know this wasn't just a break-in. This isn't just somebody with a bone to pick. This is the first move in a very dangerous game meant to bring them to their knees, to hunt them, to hurt them. That's what will make this movie so special and such a powerful first chapter of Casey's story. With his mask and weapon now in the hands of another killer, the slasher Casey's hunting is essentially himself. And with that, we're into Act 2. So now, let us just pop out macro for a second. Structurally speaking, what this kicks off in Act 2 is a whodunit, Scream-style slasher movie where there is a masked killer on the loose targeting key characters within the town of Homeland. Tonally speaking, though, it's not like Scream at all, but more of a deadly game between this killer and Casey, not unlike John Doe in Seven or the Riddler in the Batman, where each kill is a piece of a larger puzzle that leads to a climactic trap the killer wants Casey to walk into. And that game becomes all the more clear and personal when the killer goes after their first victim in sort of a classic horror stalking set piece, with this killer masquerading Casey's mask, wielding his weapon, and that victim is none other than Miss Barbara, Roxy and Casey's drunkard foster mom. And though she may be pushing 60, she's got some fight in her, but she is no match for this killer in the end. And just to say it, like in any good slasher movie, just watching our killer hunt and toy with his victims is part of the fun, and we're going to do it a few times. So the net effect of this kill is it draws Casey and Oscar back to Homeland, back to the place they left long ago and swore that they would never return, almost like a slasher version of Skyfall. Being back in this place, it strikes a deep chord inside of Casey. He is a man haunted and wants to handle this killer and get out of town fast. So let's talk about how Casey and Oscar do that for a second. First rule of hunting slashers: be a ghost. Don't get any unwanted attention. Stay in the shadows. Last thing you want is any law enforcement types on your scent. Second, look at people close to the victims. In this case, they start by spying on Miss Barbara's funeral, and it's chock full of people from Casey's past, foster siblings, neighbors, members of the community, some who are suspects, some be potential targets, some red herrings. We'll get to the important ones in a minute. Third is always follow the clues. And this is a place where Casey and Oscar differ. Oscar focuses more on the empirical, the scientific: hair, blood, footprint, DNA, things that can identify the killer. Casey, on the other hand, likes to get into the killer's head, figure out where they're going to strike next, and catch the killer in the act. It's a lot easier to ID somebody when they're dead. Casey looks at a crime scene less like a science experiment and more like a piece of art, trying to understand the killer's meaning. All slashers leave clues, usually on purpose, like when Casey and Oscar break into Miss Barbara's house after the funeral and they find that her body was moved into a downstairs coat closet and the killer left out of a second-story window instead of the front door. Now, the cops just chalk it up to circumstance, but Casey knows everything a killer does is a choice. If you understand their intention, you can understand where they intend to go next. And in this case, the closet was where Miss Barbara locked up Casey after Roxy's murder as punishment for sneaking out. And the window was how he ran away 6 months later. It is a breadcrumb trail, a personal one that only Casey would know how to follow. And sure enough, Over Act Two, as more bodies pile up, what we start to see is that they all have one thing in common. They are all people who wronged Casey in his youth. After Miss Barbara, the killer goes after the crooked priest that ran the reform school, just like where Casey went next when he was a kid. And then he hunts down a guard at the same juvie that Casey was sent to after the reform school, who made Casey's life inside a living hell. It is like a twisted slasher version of It's a Wonderful Life. Victim by victim, we're getting to walk through Casey's tortured past and see how he became the man he is now. That's the genius of the slasher's plan. Casey went to such lengths to have no human connection, but this killer still found a weakness because, of course, killing these people with Casey's mask and his weapon implicate Casey as the killer. That's the thing. Casey's not just the cat trying to catch the mouse. He's a mouse himself, and the ones chasing him only complicate things more, starting, of course, with Agent Ellis. Now, these murders have given Ellis something she's long been after, a photograph of the killer that until now she's only had a sketch of. But it's also something that feels off to her. She's been after this guy for years, and he's never let himself been caught on camera once. Not only that, he kills single men, not elderly women, and not multiple victims in such a short time span. And so, as Casey is trying to hunt this killer from the shadows, Ellis pieces together the clues the killer is intentionally leaving for the cops to implicate Casey, clues that she doesn't fully believe. And instead, just before the midpoint, Ellis lures Casey into a face-to-face meeting at an all-night diner, our nod to the scene in Heat, by leaving him a note in the one place she's pretty sure he'll find it: Roxy's grave. Now, these two are going to have a complicated and charged relationship. Tough to trust each other because even if Ellis believes that Casey isn't the one killing people in Homeland, he is still a killer, although one she's starting to understand may be doing more good than harm, and one she can't help but admit she's a little attracted to, and vice versa. These two are going to have a sort of twisted J-Lo Clooney out of sight style relationship. One a killer, one a cop, both people whose lives are consumed with death, both trying to figure out who the killer is going to strike next. Of course, they're not the only one trying to figure that out. Watching Ellis like a hawk is Cherokee County Sheriff Lonnie Wall. Now, Wall's been around a long time and has a history with Casey, going back to Roxy's murder. He arrested Casey at least 4 times when he was a kid, fighting, breaking, and entering. Wall is not all bad, truth be told. He always thought Casey had potential, just needed some tough love. He felt for Casey. No parents, lost a sister, a town that just wanted to sweep the Lake House massacre under the rug, and Casey was a constant reminder of it. He knows Casey felt that he owed Roxy justice. Justice that never came. But when Wall figures out that Casey's back in Homeland after tailing Ellis and believes he's going around getting his revenge, Wall knows that he has to hunt him down because, like Wall tells Ellis, sooner or later, he'll be coming for me. Now, between Ellis, Wall, the killer on the loose, and bodies of his old grudges piling up, Casey's in a mess like he's never been in before. It's why Oscar keeps saying to Casey throughout Act Two, maybe the best thing is for them to leave, because the stakes are higher than they've ever been. This killer is not just dangerous, he says, but smart and angry. Your death isn't enough for them. They want to frame you, tear down everything you've ever done. If you get caught, every killer you've stopped will suddenly be a martyr. They'll call you a psycho, a vigilante, a murderer. And most importantly, this killer is already 5 moves ahead of us. Part of Casey agrees, but there's a problem. One he's tried to avoid his entire life, one he's never had before. Clementine, a little red-headed girl that's just a toddler the night Roxy was killed. Now she's all grown up in her early 20s. He first spots her at Miss Barbara's funeral, then she catches him breaking into Barbara's house, searching for clues that the cops might have missed, pulled a gun on him, in fact, then she realizes just who he is. Clementine remembers Casey. She had a stuffed bear that belonged to him that she's kept all these years. Casey remembers her. You can see, and will see over the movie, It's the first time he's really felt something for another person in a while. It's not romantic, just a deep bond, family, which of course is exactly what could put her in the killer's crosshairs, unless, of course, she is the killer. All the more reason Casey and Oscar have to find out who this guy is and stop them fast. And by the end of Act 2, when he's still no closer to catching this killer, is when everything goes from bad to much, much worse. So just to take you through that in macro, towards the end of Act 2, despite Ellis's protest, Wall believes he has enough evidence tying Casey to the murders, and so he tracks him down and arrests him. While Casey's in jail, Oscar continues to try and piece together the clues when the killer hunts him down in a trailer that he and Casey have posted up near an old meat processing plant on the edge of town. The imposter attacks, and we get a great set piece between the two of them. Oscar is way outmatched physically, but he knows it's his one chance to find out who the killer is. And sure enough, for just a flash, he's able to knock the killer's mask away and see their face, but we don't. And then just as fast, Oscar is gutted and left for dead. On the one hand is a devastating gut punch. For Casey, it's just like with his sister, Roxy. He blames himself all over again. On the other hand, it reveals to Wall and Ellis that Casey couldn't possibly be the killer, and vice versa. As Casey leaves jail, a place he's all too familiar with, he remembers the last thing his brother said to him before he was killed. Maybe we're the danger. Maybe these people would be safe if we just walked away. And so that's what he does. He gets in the truck, about to leave when Ellis goes to see him one last time. She has something to show him that might be hard to see, but she thinks it's important. An evidence photo of Oscar's body. Turns out before he died, he left Casey a message in blood carved on his arm with a meat hook. It's one word: Clementine. That's what Oscar had been putting together at the end. Clementine had been obsessed with Casey, tracking him down, searching for him for years. It wasn't an accident. She was even a member of the 3000. Her whole innocent, doe-eyed act was a lie. She'd been arrested 5 times in 3 different states. She only moved back to Homeland 6 months ago. She wasn't trying to frame Casey. She was trying to frame Oscar and make it look like he'd had enough of Casey's hunting, then kill Oscar so she could take his place, family back together again. But she didn't count on Oscar leaving one last clue for Casey to find. Ellis wanted Casey to know the truth, so at least he didn't blame himself. You can see how much she cares about him, how close they almost get. But instead, this revelation has sparked a rage inside of Casey, the likes of which we've never seen. And with that, he tears back to the one place in Homeland he hasn't been able to set foot, the one place that consumes his nightmares, the lake house. It's now abandoned, decrepit, and playing host to a bunch of teens and 20-somethings that celebrate the massacre every year on its anniversary. And it's where Clementine just happens to be right now, planning God knows what. And with that, we go into the first part of our finale. Casey makes his way into the party, the memories of the night with Roxy flooding back, the lights, the crowd, the music, until finally he finds Clementine there, acting like nothing's wrong because she doesn't know that Casey knows. And in a flash, he attacks. Clementine runs. She tries to act innocent, like she's got it all wrong. She tells him Oscar told her to meet him there. It's a lie, but she swears she's telling him the truth. She shows him her phone, and sure enough, there's a text from him from just moments before he died. But why would he? And that's when Casey realizes the word Clementine. It was carved on Oscar's left forearm, but he was actually left-handed. It should have been carved on his right foot. Oscar didn't carve it. Somebody else did. Somebody who tried to trick Casey into killing his own foster sister. And that's when suddenly, whoosh, Casey's sickle slams down into Clementine's back, revealing the actual killer right behind her. Everybody screams, and we go into our true finale, a twisted, macabre version of the opening with Casey and the killer locked in an almost epic battle fueled by rage and vengeance, until finally the fight turns and Casey is able to rip his mask free, finally revealing the killer is FBI agent Ellis. It wouldn't be a slasher movie without one final twist. She's been behind it all along, hell-bent on revenge against Casey for, believe it or not, 20 years since the night of the massacre. And that's when Casey realizes he met Ellis before, when he was just 12 and she was 14, and they went outside to the GTO, and he was just about to get his first kiss. She's the same girl. And just like Casey, her life was never the same after that night. She lost 8 of her best friends, including her 2 older brothers, all because Casey and his sister lured a slasher into this house. It's a moment that holds up a mirror to Casey in a way he never thought possible. Just like him, she's been driven by revenge for the death of another. Just like him, she's taken it out on others. And just like him, it has consumed her life completely. She stares at him cold and says a very simple phrase: everybody wears a mask. And with that, she puts it back on and lunges at Casey with his own weapon. And once more, they fight tooth and nail, harder than we've ever seen, as does she. And they go back and forth, bodies getting torn up, until he looks over and he sees Clementine hiding in the same closet he did as a boy. And now he knows what he has to do at all costs: survive. And with that, he charges Ellis to the window, the same one the killer went through, and he dives out with her. The two of them fight as they crash down onto the ground, bodies broken, until finally he hoists her up and impales her on a broken piece of rebar. For a moment, Casey just stares at Ellis's dying body. And it's almost like seeing himself. Slowly, she pulls the mask off and hands it to him. Almost a sign of respect. This belongs to you, she says. Police sirens ring out in the distance. The last time he heard those in this place was when he lost his sister. Casey looks to Ellis, to the mask, and he just tells her, keep it. I don't need it anymore. And with that, she dies. And with that, we cut. And now, it's some weeks later, and Casey is returning home, this time with family, Clementine in tow, healing, ready to start anew. He shows her the cave and what his life had become. And the two sit on the porch and share, finally, that last sip of whiskey, wondering what the future might hold. And you might think the whole thing is over until a car rolls up. It's Walt. He hands him a file. It's everything that they've ever had on his sister's killer. Casey earned it. Turns out the killer was last seen in Mexico City. And for a moment, Casey and Clementine just share a long look. And then she smiles. I'll book the flights. That we're out.